All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning if you're in the West Coast, or afternoon if you are east of the Mississippi. Um, my name is Hope Atwell, and I am the Executive Director slash CEO of the Asian Real Estate Association of America. We're hosting a webinar today to talk about really what's going on with Asian American homeownership. And we have the privilege and the pleasure of having one of the senior economists over at Freddie Mac. Um, we're very grateful for the partnership that we've had with Freddie Mac for many, many years. Started with Jim Park, one of our founders, and it has been an ongoing partnership for the last 21 years. And so prior to Rama's presentation, I know Monica LaCrue, who is also with Freddie Mac, formerly with AREAA, will also be speaking, and delivering some sponsor remarks. But just to introduce Rama, and I wanted to check with her. I checked with her on the pronunciation of her last name, Yanamandra, right? Sorry if I'm butchering it, but Rama is a senior economist with the economics and housing research team at Freddie Mac. And she started there in 2017. In this position, Rama is responsible for primary and secondary mortgage market analysis and research, macroeconomic analysis, and forecasting. Rama actually joined Freddie Mac in 2016 as a consultant at that time. Prior to joining Freddie Mac, Rama was a consultant at the World Bank. And so we have the privilege again and the opportunity of hearing firsthand from Rama today. And so, the report that we publish each year is called the State of Asia America Report. We pull a lot of the data from Freddie Mac, and this is one of the data sets, one of the data points that we have, not just that is part of the report, but it is an ongoing data that we take a look at. And so we hope that you would, as we also at AREAA would be getting a lot of information and education from this. And we ask that you reserve your questions at the end of Rama's presentation so we can compile it for her at the end of the presentation. So Monica, I'll turn it over to you and then to Rama.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us today. We find a lot of insights, that we can provide to the communities that you serve. We hope that a lot of the data that you get from the State of Asia America report is helping grow your business and make the argument that obviously the AANHPI population is not one monolithic, community. There are many different layers to it. You guys know that in serving the community. And so we at Freddie Mac are committed to providing additional insights into the AANHPI population so that we can all better understand the needs for this community. So Rama's joining us today to really do a deep dive into some of the new research that we have here at Freddie Mac. All of this information is public on our website. I'll be providing links to that afterwards. But without further ado, Rama, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Monica and Hope. Thank you for having me here today with you, all of you. So I'll be presenting our research on the Asian homeownership that we published in June. It was a part of our outlook, and given that June is National Homeownership Month. But before I dive into the Asian homeownership, I wanted to give a quick update on the economy and housing market, very brief, high-level view. So last week began on shaky grounds, mainly due to the weaker than expected employment report for July. So job growth slowed. The economy added 114,000 jobs, but actually it was weaker in April. In April, we added only 108,000 jobs. And now we are averaging around 170,000 jobs per month over the last 3 months. Over the last 6 months, the average has been around 200,000. So overall, even though there was a slowdown, just in 2024, we've already added around 1.4 million jobs. And prior to the pandemic, the average job growth per year was around 2 million. So we're doing pretty well as compared to the pre-pandemic averages. And the unemployment rate did tick up. It went up to around 4.3%. That was the highest level since September 2021. So that sort of created this panic, and people started talking about the SAM rule, which is actually intended to signal a recession. You know that a recession has already started when the 3-month moving average of the national unemployment rate, it rises by around 0.5 percentage points or more relative to the minimum of the 3-month averages over the last 12 months, right? But this time it does not signal a recession, because the uptick in the unemployment rate is because more people are looking for jobs, more people have joined the labor force. We talk about the increase in immigration that's adding to the labor force. So all of those factors, negate the. In fact, Claudia herself has said that this time it's not going to signal a recession. We knew that. I mean, we knew that the unemployment rate would go up, but that's not worrisome yet, or it's not a signal of recession just yet. So again, as I mentioned, the immigration has been going up as per the CBO estimates. Net immigration for 2023 was around 3.3 million compared to the census estimate of 1.1 million. So huge increase, and they're adding to the labor force. And the other reason why we saw this volatility in the markets was because of the Japanese carry trade. Interest rates in Japan have been low for decades. So when they raise the interest rates, and US talking about cutting rates, so that sort of narrowed the spread, and that's what also triggered some of the sell-off. So, but overall, the economy still remains strong. And if you track the high frequency indicators, we have restaurant reservations, travel, retail sales, weekly retail sales, hotel occupancy, jobless claims, bankruptcies, they declined. So all of these factors have still been going pretty strong. So overall, the economy is still doing okay, and we're not in a recession. And but the one positive out of the sell-off was the rates, the longer run rates decline, right? So mortgage rates, they actually fell to the lowest in over a year. And what's happening around in the housing market is that it's switching from a seller's to a buyer's market. And buyers, they want to wait to be sure that the rates don't decline more before they jump into the market. So when rates started declining in mid-July, they were at the same level as they were in March of this year. But in March, when rates declined, we saw an uptick in the purchase applications. And that's not happening right now, because homeowners or home buyers, they want to wait before they jump into the market. So we'll have to see what happens to home sales by September, when the Fed is expected to cut rates. But overall, for now, the market seems to have stabilized. So just wanted to give that quick high-level overview. And now I will jump into the Asian research. So these views are my own and not of Freddie Mac. So when I talk of the Asian population, as you all know, I'm talking about the Asian Americans along with the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. And this group has been a growing share of the US population. So, and again, I'm going to use AANHPI and Asian interchangeably throughout this presentation. So the share of this group went up over the last 20 years. It's around 7% now. It was around 4% in 2003. And prior to that, prior to 2013, I think Asians were grouped together with others. And only since 2013 did census start including a question on the Asian subgroups. If you go to the next slide, please. Now, in terms of the Asian subgroups, Asian Indians, they account for the largest share of the population at 24%, followed by Chinese, as you can see here, at 22%. And it's the share of Indians that increased the most between 2013 and 2023. So what we also saw is that there's been a shift in the share of the subgroups between these 2 years, over the last 10 years. Share of some of the other subgroups declined, such as the Koreans, Filipinos, Japanese, even though their overall population has been increasing. If you can see the numbers in the pie chart, that's the actual population, but the shares have moved around a little bit, which means that the Indian and Chinese population has actually grown at a much faster pace than these other subgroups. Share of Vietnamese has been stable at around 17%. So I was also looking at the year of immigration, and we see that almost 60% of the Vietnamese, they came to the US before the year 2000. 50% of the Koreans also came to the country before 2000, but 70% of the Indians, they actually immigrated to the country after the year 2000. So, so we are seeing an uptick in the Indian population in US after the year 2000. So that's what's driving up the shares as well. So let's go to the next slide, please. So if you look at where the population, where the Asian population is concentrated in the US, it's mostly in the New Jersey metro area, as well as LA, San Francisco, Dallas, Houston, and Seattle. You can see the dark blue, that's where you have most concentration of these groups. And what we also did was we looked at the subgroups, and we find that Indians and Chinese, they are mostly concentrated on the East Coast and the New Jersey area, whereas the Vietnamese, Filipino, Japanese, they are mainly on the West Coast. So what we observe is that most of these groups, they come into the gateway cities. That's where their shares are high. And then, as they enter the expensive metros, and then they move towards the more affordable areas. So, so that's on the concentration. If you go to the next slide, please. So Monica mentioned this, and one common misconception is that the Asians are considered a big homogeneous group, that it's a monolith, when in fact it's the exact opposite. So I wanted to spend some time on this slide. Here we are comparing the various subgroups of Asians with the non-Hispanic whites, and Asians, they are, they're from many countries, they have different cultures, different demographic profiles, and that's also reflected here as well. So as you can see, the Asians on an average, they are younger, with the NHPI population that is the youngest among these groups, with a median age of 33 years. This is as of 2023, followed by Indians and other Asians at 34 years. For the group as a whole, the median age is 37 years. Japanese and Vietnamese are slightly older at 48 and 45 years compared to the non-Hispanic whites at 43 years, as you can see here. Asians, on an average, they also have a higher level of education, but that again, you can see here, it varies across these subgroups. Overall, for the group, 45% have a bachelor's degree or higher. For NHPI, the share is only at around 18%. They have a higher bachelor's degree or higher. 59% of Indians, they have a bachelor's degree or higher. 47% of Chinese, and 50% of, more than 50% of Japanese and Koreans also have a bachelor's degree or higher. So obviously, this higher level of education translates into higher incomes as well. On an average, the median income for the group as a whole was at around $107,000 per year. This was in 2023 dollars. And if you compare it to the non-Hispanic whites, that's at around 81,000. So Indians, they have the maximum for the group at 150,000. And you can see the other subgroups have slightly lower, and NHPI also has amongst the lowest for the subgroups. So I also have the foreign born and the citizenship here, which captures the immigration aspects, which is a very big deal for this group, as you all are aware, particularly for the Indians. And we continue to remain aliens even after spending several years in the country. So Indians for a much longer time than we would like to. And the foreign born share is also much higher for this group as compared to some of the other subgroups. Japanese and NHPI, they have a slightly lower share of foreign born for obvious reasons. And the citizenship rate is actually the lowest for Indians, as you can see here. Now, in terms of headship and homeownership rates, these rates are lower for Asians as compared to the non-Hispanic whites, but obviously it's still higher than some of the other race ethnicity groups. If you go to the next slide. And this is one aspect I wanted to talk about before I get into the details of homeownership. And this is a fact which is less well known, is the poverty status among these Asian subgroups. As you can see in this chart here, there's a wide variation here as well. Almost 2 in 5 Asians from Afghanistan, they live below the poverty line. 35% from Burma, 25%, 1/4 of the Malaysians here are below the poverty line, 18% from Singapore. I was actually surprised to see these numbers, especially from Malaysia and Singapore. I wouldn't have expected that, but the share of those in poverty is actually much higher here. as compared to some of the other Asians from the other countries. Indians at 5%, we have Chinese and NHPIs at 14%. Again, there's this huge variation. And poverty threshold is defined as those earning around $30,000 per year for a family of four. And the official poverty rate for the country for US is at around 11.5%. So you can see a lot of the Asians are still above the average for the US as a whole. So this was very surprising to me. So I did want to touch upon that before I get into the homeownership rate. If you go to the next slide, please. So the homeownership rate of this group, as I was mentioning, has been increasing over time. It was 57% in 2003, and it's at around 62% now. And on the other hand, the non-Hispanic whites homeownership rate has been stable at around 75%. So you can see that the gap has been narrowing. It's come down from around 19% to around 13% right now. That's the gap in the homeownership between the non-Hispanic whites and Asians. So if you go to the next slide, please. So what we did in this research is we tried to identify the factors which were actually contributing to this gap in homeownership between the Asians and non-Hispanic white. And we used a technique called the Oaxaca blinder decomposition. So to estimate the contribution of various factors that affect homeownership, right, to this gap between the Asians and non-Hispanic whites. So when we think of homeownership, the factors which affect homeownership are age, education, income, immigration, housing costs, where you live. And these are some of the factors that I showed in the table above. Age is a proxy for life stages, right? It's a very important predictor for homeownership. As people grow older, the more likely to get married, have children, and all of those factors affect the likelihood of homeownership. Similarly, level of education, income, the higher the level of education, higher the income, the more likely you are to be homeowners. Housing cost, on the other hand, is actually a deterrent to homeownership. Um, so what we did was when we applied the Oaxaca blinder decomposition technique to these factors, we find that almost these factors almost explain almost 70% of the homeownership gap between these two groups. So, and we find that the most important factor is immigration. As you can see here, the immigration related attributes such as citizenship, foreign born. So that explains almost 46% of the gap. This is followed by housing costs, which explains around 38% of the gap, and age, which explains around 26% of the gap. On the other hand, we have income and employment, marriage and children, education, which actually have a negative contribution, which means that these factors are actually helping to close the gap in homeownership between the Asians and the non-Hispanic whites. Now, there's also the unexplained, which accounts for almost 30% of the gap. So these are the factors which we could not capture in our analysis, such as access to credit, intergenerational wealth, language, cultural barriers. And these are also factors which affect homeownership decisions. So this is what we find for the Asians as a whole. But as I just mentioned, given that they are so diverse, the whole group is diverse, we also decided to look at a few subgroups to see if there is any difference in the factors affecting their homeownership. So if you go to the next slide. Here I have the breakdown of factors for the NHPI and the Chinese. NHPI is has one of the lowest homeownership rates. So the homeownership rate was in 2023 was 48%. So if you look at the factors, we find that these factors account for almost 83% of the gap, and 17% is unexplained. And the biggest hindrance to homeownership for this group is housing costs. That accounts for almost 34% of the gap. Age and marriage and children, that together accounts for almost 41% of the overall gap. But given that the NHPI group is much younger than the other cohorts, so as they age, get married, and have children, we expect their homeownership rate to increase over time. On the other hand, income and employment, along with where they live, that's actually they have a negative contribution. So that's actually helping to close the gap. On the right here, I have the Chinese subgroup. So the homeownership rate was around 63% in 2023. So that the gap is around 12 percentage points below the 75% homeownership rate for the non-Hispanic white. So overall, these factors, they account for almost 73% of the gap in homeownership between these two groups, and 27% is unexplained. Housing costs account for 78% of the gap, and immigration accounts for 35%. And again, you have the factors such as income, education, region, that's with the negative contribution, and that's actually helping to close the gap for the Chinese. So for both of these groups, housing costs is a big factor in explaining the gap. For Indians, we publish it on our website. I don't have the chart here, but for Indians, it's actually the immigration factors which explain a much larger part of the gap. And again, it's because Asian Indians, they immigrated to the US in recent years, and uncertainty around the immigration status is a major factor which holds back this big group from stepping into homeownership until you're sure that you can be in the country and not have to worry about renewing your H-1 visas. I don't think homeownership is achievable. So they don't want to get into that before they have they have certainty around their immigration status. So go to the next slide, please. So while housing costs are a big impediment to homeownership for this group, lack of information is also another factor which has been affecting homeownership, not just for this group, but overall for the younger generations. So what we did was we looked at the NMDB data from FHFA, and we find that only 47% of the 25 to 34-year-olds, the younger groups, they're actually familiar with, say, the mortgage rate that at the time that they were surveyed. Only 51% knew about the down payment that was needed to qualify for a mortgage, as compared to 60% for the overall respondents. So even with respect to the other aspects of the mortgage financing, such as the different types of mortgages available, the money needed for closing, the mortgage process itself. So that's less well known among the younger generations as compared to the overall population. So there's a need to educate them so that they are aware of these options available to them, which can help them achieve their dream, which can help them achieve the dream of homeownership. So for a lot of these groups and subgroups, it's very difficult to achieve this dream at home. And as an immigrant myself, I mean, it's really true that one reason why you want to come here is to help you achieve that dream. So Freddie Mac has been playing an important role in making homeownership possible for this, not just this population, but for everyone. And I'm going to hand it over to Monica to walk us through through some of the resources that we have available.
Thank you, Rama. Thank you so much for those insights. I definitely think that there's a lot of work that both Freddie Mac as well as AREAA can do to kind of address some of those misconceptions about home ownership. So absolutely. So here's some resources I just want to cover with you guys really quickly that we have here at Freddie Mac. If you guys have any questions from Rama, please feel free to put them in the chat. I think we might have a few minutes for those. The first is Credit Smart, right? You touched a little bit, Rama, on the lack of just younger generation knowing the importance of either credit or just the home buying process. This is our financial education tool. It's free. Credit Smart Essentials teaches consumers how to become better money managers, repair their credit, save for retirement, things like that. We also have Credit Smart Home Buyer U, which walks them through the home buying process. So a lot of those unanswered questions about what it means to be a homeowner are answered through that. We also have our Credit Smart Coach, which is where you, the real estate professional, can become certified to teach Credit Smart Essentials in your community. We are opening a cohort that's going to start after Labor Day. I believe the registration is going to go live today for that. So be on the lookout for an email from us if you're interested in becoming a Credit Smart Coach. We also have My Home, which is a consumer-facing website that answers common questions related to home ownership. This is a great free resource that you can share with your clients if they're interested in just getting information about what it means to be a homeowner. There's a lot of scams out there, a lot of places that are collecting contact information for people and then robocalling them. This is a safe place without ads that they can go and just gain knowledge about the home buying process. We also have DPA1. We did a deep dive into DPA1 with the Mortgage Committee earlier this summer. I encourage you guys to go back and watch the recording of that if you want to deep dive into what DPA1 is. But we created basically a website where you can go to pair down payment assistance programs that are available out in the market to your buyers. So this is a great place. All you have to do is enter in the information about the client, as well as information about the home they might be purchasing to see if they qualify for any down payment programs that are out there. And then the last thing that we have is our Real Estate Professionals Resource Center. This is where you can go and gain some insights. All of the data that Rama covered today was shared earlier this summer in June. If you want to get first, insights on what's happening through our website, please go here to do it. We just saw that interest rates obviously had declined, and if you want to use those that are coming from Freddie Mac to post on directly to your social media or pages, letting your followers know that, hey, I'm the housing expert. I know what's going on in the market. See, I have a direct link to Freddie Mac's information. Please feel free to go bookmark those pages. We also do upcoming trainings and things like that. So if you have any additional questions or need assistance, we're definitely here to help. So Hope, I'll turn it back over to you. See if you have any questions for Rama or myself before we close out.
Yeah, well, thank you. We do have a question from Tam Hickson from our Portland chapter. Tam is asking if there are resources that they could use as a chapter to circulate, and also if you have a local contact in Portland, since they are hosting a multicultural homeownership fair next month.
Awesome. Well, that sounds very exciting. I definitely think the resource that AREAA has created in the State of Asia America report is a great resource to utilize. I know that they do a deep dive into different regions. So looking at the Pacific Northwest and doing a deep dive there is definitely there. A lot of the contact that Rama covered is available on our Freddie Mac website. You can link to, obviously, this pre-recording if you want to educate those who might want to do a deep dive into the demographics. And then, unfortunately, we don't have anybody who's based in Portland. However, I am here in San Diego, and we do travel to different events to provide insights. So feel free to reach out directly if you want to share some information to see if Freddie Mac might be able to participate in any of your local events.
Thank you. Rama, I do have a question. On one of the slides, I think it was the slide that you had showed the difference or the reasons for why Asian Indians versus like Chinese Americans, right? The reasons for why there is a gap. Now, for Chinese Americans, I think the number one it says is housing cost. While housing cost is also a big factor for Asian Indians, it's not as high as it is for Chinese Americans. That's almost 80%. Do you have any insights on why there is this fairly large variance between those two subgroups?
Right. I think there are two factors. One is if you look at the table comparing the incomes, so the incomes of Indians is much higher than that of Chinese, the median income. So that could be one factor. And secondly is, again, the region where they are located. So Indians, they come into, even though they come into the expensive, they are moving out to more affordable areas, probably. That's what I can actually look into where exactly they're located, but it's mostly in the New Jersey area. So they are sort of moving into the more affordable region. So region, as you can see, is also another factor. So I think both of those factors are probably what's affecting the the housing costs. So for Indians, housing costs is also high, but it's not as high as immigration factors. So again, because of the recency, a lot of Indians have migrated in recent years, and it takes just forever to get your status here, your green card. And as someone, I went through this pain myself. Someone close had their visa rejected, so it's like so much stress, so much uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen. So that is a major factor for Indians, I think. So I feel those are the factors which are explaining that difference in the housing costs as well. And incomes, the median household income for Indians is 150, whereas it's around 100K for a Chinese. So there is that difference as well.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. And then just to follow up to that, Rama, you touched on just poverty rates within the subgroups. And it's
Mhm.
something that we don't hear very often when we're talking about the Asian American and even Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander community, right? It's often masked. Poverty is often masked because of the successes that a lot of our community members enjoy. And if you can maybe touch on this and why this is important, why we cannot overlook the poverty rates within subgroups of ANHPIs.
Right, exactly. See, you're absolutely right. It masks, the success that we see. We see a few, Indians or Chinese doing well for themselves, and then, you're just clubbing everyone together that, oh, they're Asians, they're doing well. But there is a huge divergence. So, and that's the reason why I wanted to highlight this, that um, it's not the same story for everybody. There
Mhm,
are
mhm.
differences, and we really need to help the Asians as well. It's like it's assumed that, oh, Asians are doing them well for themselves. We don't need to do anything for them. That's not true. So, and that's the reason why I wanted to highlight that they need help too. So it's
Yeah, yeah,
it,
for
it
sure.
I was actually surprised to see this. I mean, I was absolutely surprised. Like, and given that the U.S. poverty rate is at 11.5, and some of these people have a much higher poverty rate than the
Mhm,
U.S. average,
mhm.
it was a shock to me. It was so. I mean, I just think we need to talk more about this. This is just not
Yeah.
known.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for including that, right? Again, it's not very often that we are looking at this type of like data, such as poverty rate, and hopefully we can look at solutions for um, uplifting our community members who are living within that poverty rate and all of that stuff. I'm looking at the clock, and I think that we are on the top of the hour. Monica and Rama, thank you for the partnership. Thank you for all of this. I know that folks are asking if the deck will be shared, and it will be. It's also recorded, so it will be posted on our resources and I believe also in our YouTube link. We are going to have a lot more sessions that focus on really the State of Asia America report at our national convention. So look for that. Look for those sessions. Again, thank you for the partnership. Thank you for providing your time this morning, this afternoon, and we'll see you again at another webinar or an in-person event. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.